In 2023, in the aftermath of their breakup, Florida teenager Spencer Pearson began threatening violence towards his ex-girlfriend, Madison Shemitz. The latter was a senior and a star softball player at Ponte Vedra High School. Pearson had recently graduated from the school where he was a football player. Pearson's threats had become so unnerving for the family that Shemitz's mother, Jacqueline Rogue, was reportedly in the process of obtaining a restraining order. On June the 3rd of 2023, Pearson waited outside a sports bar in Ponte Vedra Beach near Jacksonville for the mother and daughter to emerge. They were reportedly startled by his sudden appearance, quickly paid their check, and then made their way to their vehicle. Pearson charged the mother and daughter and started stabbing them both. Rogue was knifed in the forehead and leg trying to defend Shemitz. Pearson then straddled the latter, pinned her down with one arm and with the other stabbed her about 15 times. 23-year-old bystander Kennedy Armstrong heard the two victims' screams, rushed to the scene and intervened. He knocked 18-year-old Pearson off his bloodied ex-girlfriend, subsequently telling a media outlet, "I hit the kid as hard as I could." Pearson ended the attack, but not before he knifed Armstrong, inflicting a ruptured artery and ligaments to his right hand, injuries for which he later needed surgery. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Pearson with severe knife wounds to his throat. He, the two victims, and the Good Samaritan were rushed to a hospital and they all survived. Following his release from hospitalized care on June the 23rd, Pearson was transported to the St. Johns County Jail awaiting trial for 2 counts of attempted murder and aggravated battery. Shemitz gave an update on her condition in July of 2023, telling the media that she'd been left paralyzed from the chest down after suffering cuts to her spine. Her condition was temporary, but her recovery would take time, according to her doctors. Shemitz thanked the hospital staff, her mother, and Armstrong, with whom she was pictured, and of whom she said, "Kennedy is and forever will be my hero and is now family for life." Number 6. Kylon Marbury. The U.S. Marshals Violent Offenders Task Force and members of the Rochester Police Department SWAT team tracked down teenager Kylon Marbury to a Henrietta hotel on July the 21st of 2023. In February, a Buffalo man was shot 3 times with a rifle in his upper body while he was visiting family in Rochester. 35-year-old Jermaine Wilkins was able to reach a residence on Parcells Avenue where he knocked on the door and told the homeowners he'd been shot. When the emergency services reached the location, Wilkins became unresponsive and he was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation that followed identified Marbury as the shooter. Hours before killing Wilkins, he'd fired a 9mm handgun at a man walking on Scioto Street, but missed him. Marbury was charged with second-degree murder, first-degree reckless endangerment, and second-degree criminal possession of a weapon, but the team's motives in both cases remain unclear. The police noted that there was no connection between him and Wilkins, which seemingly indicated that the victim had been randomly selected. Marbury was also suspected to have taken part in a number of other crimes in Rochester and its neighboring areas, including assaults and car thefts. Number 5. Jesse James Altman. In early 2018, teenager Jesse James Altman was a standout football player at Etowah High School in Alabama. He was a 3-star, 285-pound defensive tackle on the cusp of a promising athletic career, as he already had offers from several football programs including Texas, West Virginia, Oregon, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. Leading up to January the 4th of 2018, Altman and 4 other teenagers conspired to rob 18-year-old Aaron Joe Huff. The football player's accomplices were Broderick Lawrence Pearson, Lontory Orlando Harrison, Caleb Blake Whitworth, and Tyler Michael Abbott, all of whom were in their mid to late teens. Abbott had reportedly contacted Huff to buy marijuana from him, but his group had planned to take the drugs at gunpoint. According to testimonies from Huff's friends, the would-be dealer was also intent on deceit, as he'd reportedly placed a potato in a Spider-Man backpack and planned to sell that instead of the drugs. The meeting was set for Starnes Park in East Gadsden on the night of January the 4th. Huff thought he would be dealing with Abbott directly, but the latter kept him at the rendezvous point through text messages until Whitworth, Altman, Harrison, and Pearson arrived at the scene in a black Chevrolet Impala. During the meetup, Huff was joined by 6 other teens in a silver van. Harrison reportedly handed Altman a pistol, and he was preparing to get out of the car, but the van then pulled away. The Impala caught up with it at the intersection of Hoke and Litchfield. By multiple accounts, Harrison then emerged from the vehicle armed, ran up beside the van and stuck his arm inside the window. He then fatally shot Huff. All 5 teens were arrested in the aftermath, with Harrison being charged with capital murder and the others with felony murder. Updates on the matter from January of 2023 indicated that Harrison had been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A jury deadlocked on whether Altman was guilty of felony murder with plans for a retrial, but he was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 20 years. Whitworth was shot and killed after being released on bond, while Abbott and Pearson were still awaiting trial. Number 4. Sylvia Zavala incident. On New Year's Day 2019, an unnamed group of teenagers took a GMC Acadia for a joyride through North Houston, Texas, and started throwing eggs at passing cars. One of them had gotten behind the wheel of his family's SUV, even though he reportedly wasn't of legal driving age. During their ill-advised prank, one of the vehicles to have been egged was a 1971 Lincoln Continental, driven by 48-year-old Christopher Lopez. The latter consequently brandished a semi-automatic pistol, chased after the group, and was reported to have opened fire. Lopez's violent reaction prompted the teenage driver to run a red light on Aldine Mail Route Road near Aldine Westfield. He consequently smashed into a Ford F-150 pickup truck driven by 45-year-old Sylvia Zavala. As reported by her daughter, the woman was visiting family in Houston and was out running errands at the time. The crash, in which both vehicles became airborne, was captured on surveillance cameras from a nearby business. The force of the impact bent the pickup's frame and Zavala suffered fatal injuries. Lopez avoided the crash and kept driving. The teen was charged with murder, but updates indicated he'd only pleaded guilty to unauthorized use of a motor vehicle and was given 1 year of probation. Lopez surrendered to the authorities and faced charges of manslaughter, failure to stop and render aid, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Number 3. Kendra Mackenzie Gill. A Utah beauty queen faced up to 15 years in prison in the summer of 2013 following an ill-advised prank involving homemade explosive devices. 18-year-old Kendra Mackenzie Gill had been recently crowned Miss Riverton, but in the wake of her arrest, she stepped down from that position and relinquished the $2,000 scholarship that had come with it. In August, Gill and 3 other teens bought supplies at Walmart and made the explosive devices from plastic bottles, toilet cleaner, and aluminium foil. They then threw them at the homes and in the driveways of their friends as part of the prank meant to scare them. No one was hurt in the incident, but the group was arrested and charged with multiple counts of felony possession of explosive devices. Some local residents believed that they were punished too harshly for the incident and that they deserved community service instead of the lengthy prison sentences they were facing. Gill described her actions as a stupid mistake. While speaking to a media outlet, she and the other 18-year-olds all took plea deals and admitted to the misdemeanor of attempted possession of a chemical device. For each of them, the charges would be dismissed upon the payment of a $500 fine and the completion of 200 hours of community service. Number 2. Connor Stewart. On May the 20th of 2017, English teenager Connor Stewart and his friends were inside a corner shop in Blackpool, where they were involved in an argument with 47-year-old Michael Rhodes. The latter, a man battling drug addiction, was intoxicated and unsteady on his feet. Once outside, Stewart started showing off for his friends by shadowboxing in front of Rhodes, who put up his hands adopting a defensive posture and tried to walk away. Stewart then threw a forceful punch to the man's face. Rhodes collapsed and struck his head on the concrete, suffering a fatal skull fracture. The attack was captured on CCTV and cell phone video. Stewart and his companions ran away as one of them was heard shouting, "Oi, he's bleeding! His head's bleeding!" while another exclaimed, "He killed him!" Stewart briefly returned to the scene and pleaded with the unresponsive Rhodes to wake up before fleeing once more. He was arrested and initially tried to claim he'd acted in self-defense before ultimately pleading guilty to manslaughter. Stewart was sentenced to 3 years in a youth offenders institution. The teen was reported to have shown little emotion when the clip of the fatal strike was played again in court. The sentencing judge commented on the attack's senselessness and addressed Stewart to say there was absolutely no need for you to get involved with him and he did nothing to provoke you hitting him. We have our earlier release on when acting impulsively goes wrong, coming up straight after number 1. Stay put if you'd like to see more. Number 1. Sydney Gilstrap Portley. In 2017, a teenager by the name of Rashawn Richardson enrolled at the Hillcrest High School in Dallas, Texas. Richardson told school officials that he was 17 years old and that he'd been left homeless in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. He joined the school's basketball team, the Hillcrest Panthers, for their 2017-2018 season and was voted the District Offensive Player of the Year. As the team was playing in a tournament in February of 2018, coaches from North Mesquite High School recognized Richardson. It would emerge that he wasn't a teenager but a 25-year-old man named Sydney Gilstrap Portley. He had played for North Mesquite while in high school before graduating in 2011. He had a fiancée and a young child at the time of pretending to be a teenager and enrolling at Hillcrest. A family member claimed that Gilstrap Portley's passion was basketball, describing his actions as mischanneled determination, and adding that he'd basically tried to push rewind in his life. He'd taken advantage of the high school's looser policy concerning homeless students and pretended he was a hurricane victim. Dallas Independent District Superintendent Michael Hinojosa described the series of events as the perfect storm. The revelation made national and international headlines and was covered by publications such as Sports Illustrated and Esquire. The situation was worsened by the fact that, while posing as a high school student, Gilstrap Portley had dated a female teenager. She told the authorities that she'd been kissed and groped by him, but denied that their relationship had gone past that point. Under a plea deal, Gilstrap Portley admitted indecency and record tampering and was given 6 years probation. Number 8. Terrell Boyd. While outside a movie theater in Newark, New Jersey, Terrell Boyd stumbled upon an unoccupied police SUV in May of 2019. In a live-streamed incident, the 22-year-old proceeded to urinate on the cop car while a crowd cheered him on. Predictably, the footage was sent to the authorities and Boyd was arrested within 24 hours at his West Orange home. He was charged with lewdness, criminal mischief, and disorderly conduct. Newark Police Public Safety Director Anthony Ambrose released a statement condemning the disrespectful act as a personal insult to the police and an act that was detrimental towards law enforcement's efforts of improving the quality of life in the city. While it was definitely his most publicized, the incident wasn't Boyd's first criminal act towards a police vehicle. In October of the previous year, he was arrested and charged with burglarizing a cruiser parked outside the Hoboken Police Department. He and an accomplice had rummaged through the vehicle, unzipping a Narcan kit and throwing 2 summons books on the ground. The status of that case remained unclear as of Boyd's latest arrest. Speaking of the latter incident, Ambrose described the public's initiative of informing the police of the video's existence as a sign of mutual respect. Number 7. Ashley Keast. In September of 2013, Englishman Ashley Keast and an accomplice broke into a property in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, while the owners were on holiday. They made off with various valuables that included jewelry, electronics, and an Audi A4. Keast also stole a SIM card from the home, inserted it into another phone, and took a selfie, which he posted on WhatsApp. He accidentally sent the photo to the victim's work colleagues, who became suspicious and notified law enforcement. The police consequently raided 23-year-old Keast's home and, hidden behind a radiator, found a stolen Rolex watch worth nearly $5,000. In March of the following year, Keast was jailed for 2 years and 8 months after he admitted burglary at Sheffield Crown Court. His accomplice, 27-year-old Anthony Hunt, also pleaded guilty and was given an 18-month sentence. The burglary victim felt that justice had been served, according to investigators assigned to the case. However, Keast later reverted to his poor decision-making and arranged for a threatening letter to be sent to the victim. It resulted in him being charged and ultimately found guilty of making threats to kill, witness intimidation, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. As a result, 4 more years were added on top of his original sentence. Number 6. Robert Hobby and Marcus Reeves. 2 petty thieves in Central Florida went on a stealing spree in and around Ocala in the fall of 2020 and were eventually captured following a series of critical mistakes they'd made during their criminal activity. As reported by the Marion County Sheriff's Office, 41-year-old Robert Hobby and Marcus Reeves, aged 23, stole cigarettes and lottery tickets from several convenience stores. They were caught on CCTV smoking at the scene of their crimes, but ultimately, the police didn't even need the footage to identify them. After breaking into one store, the thieves left their tools behind, and Reeves forgot his wallet, which contained his driver's license. Officers went to arrest the man at his home, whereupon he confessed and reported he gave up his partner as well. They were taken to Marion County Jail and each held on a $56,000 bond on a combined total of 14 theft and burglary charges. Number 5. Lakeisha Brisbane. In November of 2015, law enforcement in Pinellas County, Florida, arrested 21-year-old Charmaine Arnold after she'd skipped out on a cab fare of about $60. However, Arnold also had an outstanding warrant for a felony battery case in Miami-Dade County, which resulted in her bond being set at $7,500. Arnold would spend about a week in custody before her friend, 46-year-old Lakeisha Brisbane, made several payments for her with a Clearwater Bail Bonds company. The transactions totaled $850, but it would soon emerge that the Visa card used by Brisbane had been stolen and was in the name of an elderly male victim. Brisbane signed several documents and sales receipts, in addition to allowing the company to make photocopies of her driver's license. The paperwork thus became evidence and allowed for an easy arrest of Brisbane, who was charged with grand theft and credit card fraud, both felonies. The woman, who also went by the alias Lakeisha Best, was a convicted felon who'd been released in early 2010. She'd been held for 15 months in a state prison after she was convicted on various fraud charges. Number 4. Richard Alma Roy. British serial burglar Richard Alma Roy was jailed for 5 years in January of 2013 at Norwich Crown Court after stealing a laptop while he was wearing an electronic tag. At the time of his latest offense, 33-year-old Alma Roy was serving a suspended sentence for a previous burglary. In spite of law enforcement tracking his movements, the Norfolk man broke into a Norwich apartment and made off with the computer. Drug addiction was reported as a factor in his inability to realize the ramifications of his actions. The anti-crime device for which he'd been fitted enabled officers to easily trace his whereabouts, and they recovered the missing laptop from the repeat offender's home. Alma Roy was taken into custody and admitted the burglary, asking for 5 similar offenses to be considered. After he was handed his sentence, Alma Roy was warned by the presiding judge that his sentences would only get longer if he continued to offend. The judge also commented on the man's issues with substance abuse, stating, "The only person that can stop you taking drugs is you." Number 3. Andrew Kellett. Leading up to the spring of 2008, Andrew Kellett from Leeds, England, posted dozens of videos on his YouTube channel that showed him and others engaging in a wide array of criminal activities. 23-year-old Kellett's excessive boasting led to him being dubbed the country's dumbest criminal, as he'd provided the authorities with abundant evidence to arrest and convict him for various offenses that included him leaving a gas station without paying, taking Class A drugs, racing and driving at high speeds, trespassing or shouting abuse at passers-by. Kellett persisted in documenting his illicit exploits in spite of the legal consequences, and even recorded himself receiving a suspended sentence at Leeds Magistrates Court. The situation escalated to the point that the same court handed Kellett, who called himself Mr. Chimp online, an interim antisocial behavior order, or ASBO, in May of 2008. It prohibited him from posting images, videos, or descriptions of unlawful activities. He was also banned from driving or encouraging others to drive in what would be deemed as a dangerous or antisocial manner. Any breach of the temporary order could have resulted in Kellett being jailed. Most of his videos were removed leading up to and after the decision. Kellett opposed the order, claiming that it violated his human rights by limiting his ability to freely express himself. Updates on the matter indicated that the interim ASBO had been made into a full order. In July of 2008, Kellett stated in the aftermath that he was just an entertainer, adding, "I'm not Britain's dumbest criminal, I'm just misunderstood." Number 2. Jason Dante Hayes. In 2016, Pennsylvania teenager Jason Dante Hayes was characterized by the Nether Providence Township Police Chief as one of the dumbest criminals he'd ever encountered following a fumbled robbery. In early January, on the 3rd of the month at around 3 a.m., Hayes entered an elderly couple's home via an unlocked kitchen window on the first floor. While the unnamed victim's husband was still sleeping in a separate bedroom, Hayes woke her up by tapping her on the shoulder with his handgun and demanded cash. The woman, reported as being in her 70s, told him that there wasn't any money in the house, so Hayes forced her to drive to an ATM. He ordered the victim to take out $2,000, threatening to kill her and her husband if she didn't cooperate. The ATM, however, only allowed for the withdrawal of $460. Hayes hatched a plan but didn't think it through. As subsequent events would confirm, he took the couple into the kitchen, where he reportedly spoke to them for about an hour before leaving their home. Hayes told the woman to meet him at a shopping center parking lot the following day and bring more money, lest he'd return and kill them both. When the victim asked how she'd recognize him, the teenage robber claimed that he'd be wearing the same clothes, which consisted of black and white camouflage pants and a dark scarf around his face. In spite of Hayes' threats, the couple went to the authorities on the afternoon of January the 3rd. Nether Providence Police Chief David Splain expressed doubts that a robber would actually show up for a scheduled appointment, but nevertheless decided to post plainclothes officers at the rendezvous spot. Hayes defied logical expectations and made his way to the parking lot, wearing the outfit described by the victims. He waited for a few minutes before officers moved in to arrest him. They found $360 in cash and a gold Timex watch, which he'd stolen from the couple, in his possession. Hayes was taken to Delaware County Prison and charged with kidnapping, robbery, and aggravated assault. Even though the incident had occurred in January, Splain told a media outlet that Hayes would definitely win the Dumbest Criminal of the Year on December 31st. Number 1. Janaya Shy Miracle Douglas. On the morning of May the 12th of 2022, a law enforcement officer from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office in Florida initiated a pursuit on a speeding Toyota sedan on Card Sound Road in Key Largo. 19-year-old Janaya Shy Miracle Douglas continued driving recklessly in spite of Sergeant Robert Dosh signaling her to pull over by activating the cruiser's lights and sirens. She eventually stopped at a three-way intersection near County Road 905. Douglas was taken into custody on charges of fleeing and eluding. After she was apprehended, the teenager surprised Dosh by stating that getting arrested had been on her bucket list since high school. Douglas, who lived in Homestead and worked as a housekeeper, faced a license suspension of anywhere between 1 and 5 years. Thanks for watching. If you could go back, what advice would you have for you from 10 years ago? Let us know in the comments section below.